We are recording on Monday, October 13th, 2025 at 10:02 a.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Karen Newell and Dr. Eben Alexander. You guys have both been on the show a million times. You guys can go in the description. You can find the links to all the websites, the books. I think most well known is probably Proof of Heaven, but there's Mapping Heaven and there's Living in a Mindful Universe and all these things. And as I was just telling you guys, it's never planned because but I feel like every time I talk to you guys, I just so happen to be at a spot in life where, for no rhyme or reason, I'm just off. And it's not like, well, what happened? My house burned down. It's not that. It's like everything's fine. I stopped drinking alcohol January of last year. I've lost like 40 pounds. I'm saving money. The podcast is paying all my bills. It's growing leaps and bounds. I'm talking to cooler people, and the guest base is getting bigger. And it's just, and, my family's healthy, and I'm healthy, and I'm praying and sleeping better. And it's all the just like report card, A plus, A plus, A plus. But starting like last Sunday, it out of nowhere it came into like pure panic, and it's just been oscillating between like panic and then just outright like not even like scary, outright just depression and apathy. Like what am I doing? Why am I getting it? And for anybody listening, no, I'm not. And no, I'm not suicidal. I have suicidal thoughts, all that. But like it just it like everything is perfect. It couldn't be better. And I'm just kind of going through the motions. And sometimes when this happens, I'll ask for like an afternoon. It kind of gets to me when it starts going on like day 10. And that's where I am. So, not to immediately just dump all of that on you guys, but I always seem to come out of discussions with you two feeling much better about it. So, I suppose I'll hand it over to you guys
Did-
Well,
I just have a quick question though. Did something trick did you identify a trigger for this, or did it just come out of the blue?
out of the blue last Sunday. So, a week from last night. Just like truly everything's fine.
well, I
Everything.
would say that that's kind of a natural part of soul growth. I mean, I know I hit my own um, kind of slick spots where I kind of have to step back and wonder, well, what am I really wanting to put my focus on now? So it's not like it all just, is beautiful, sunsets and roses forever once you make these discoveries. I think the challenges in life are really what kind of wake us up and allow us to grow into who we came here to be. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate you on the stopping of alcohol
Thank you.
last January. I quit drinking alcohol in June of 1991.
I quit in August of 2008.
And I've never regretted it one bit. And, I've seen kind of the damage, as a doctor, I've seen the kind of damage that alcohol and other addictions can do. In fact, I've faced them in my own family, birth family, adoptive family. I mean, these things, can be a tremendous challenge, but it's fantastic, given all the recent health data, that you let alcohol go. I think if more people knew just how risky alcohol was, they wouldn't keep drinking. I'm not making any kind of moral judgment on anybody because, I spent plenty of my years um, paying attention to alcohol before I realized that it wasn't my friend. And so that's a huge step in the right direction, but still, don't worry that you still hit these spots. I mean, to me, they just, when I have doubts, it's often something that's solved by better recognizing how I can contribute to the higher good.
Mm.
That's just something that very kind of naturally can kind of step in and give you a reason for waking up each day is when you're helping other people and you're doing some stuff to make the world a better place. And you're clearly doing a lot of that with your podcast. So,
Thank you.
I would just add, you gave us this whole kind of diatribe on how great everything's going. And when everything's going great, it's almost like, well, you're kind of looking for the next kind of thing to land. So part of it might be intuition that everything's going great, but something's going to happen and you're just kind of tapping into it on the early side. Or it's really funny when people complain about all the challenges in the world and oh my gosh, we all suffer and there's so much to do. And then take all those challenges away. As Eben said, that's our engine for growth.
Yeah.
Take all those challenges away. how are you growing? Maybe you're just kind of in this space where how am I going to grow if everything's going great? Is this all there is? Isn't there any more? I'm only, you're young, in your 30s, I think. You've
35.
got, yeah, you've got decades ahead of you. And if I reached my peak, might be where you're thinking, is this all there is? And so, I don't know what exactly you do with that, but it's just possible explanations for why you might have tumbled into this sort of feeling.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing I love more than working. Like I just love working towards a goal, even if I proclaim that I hate it when it's happening. And for a
Hmm.
while, like
Hmm.
the last couple of years I was drinking, again, I was never like a hard drinker, so I don't want to pretend like I know the burden of people who are like true alcoholics, but I would get like super drunk on a Friday, play video games, eat some pizza, and then I'd always have like a panic attack the next day, which is I have a very high metabolism, so it was some form of like opiate withdrawal, and it was and same thing with like a benzodiazepine or even gabapentin. Just I'm super hypersensitive to that stuff. Um, and I'd have these horrible panic attacks. I mean, I don't mean like, hey, I'm a little off today. I mean like gripping the sheets, like calling my mom, like while like praying, like, and I would do it like weekend after weekend. And part of me was like, well, I just really like the Friday night, and the Friday night was fun playing like video games online with my, best friends from fifth grade. Like it was fun. And one thing I kind of realized looking back on it is like, oh, that was intentional self-sabotage. Because
Mhm.
it was I wake up Saturday, it's a horrible day. Sunday, I'm exhausted, and it's like pick yourself up. Go to the gym. We're gonna go do podcasts. We're gonna start dieting again. We're gonna do all the things, and it's just the Sisyphus. It's just push that wheel. And then I think what I was doing, I disguised it in my conscious mind of like, oh, alcohol is just fun. I think what it really was is I was Sisyphus, and I got to the top of the mountain, so I just pushed it over. And I was like, oh my God, I can't let it go down. And I know that because it's been almost 2 years, and I don't like crave alcohol. I mean, sure, it's fun, but whatever. I think what's gotten me the most is I don't know. I maybe I don't feel like I'm up against the wall.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking, that you
Yeah.
don't have this challenge anymore.
God.
So, one thing you could do is create that for yourself. Maybe you volunteer for an organization and help people with their challenges, and find a way to get that sort of satisfaction back that seems to be missing.
Yeah, and then I kind of oscillate back and forth. I'm like, man, that's like a profound oscillation to come to peace with. You got to be not normal work. You got to be fighting, and it's the best thing, even though you hate it, and all you want to do is finish it. And like, what a odd flip that you once you finish it, it's the worst thing in the world. And I'm just like, is it that? Like, what was the point of achieving all of it? Like, what was it just tear after tear. Early when I first spoke to you, Dr. Alexander, I was like still living with my parents. My goal is like I just want to move out at age 30. And after that it was like I want to, have a cooler studio. And then it was I want to get an apartment where my bedroom and studio are separate. And then it was I want to get an apartment where I have a guest room so my parents can come stay with me. And then it was I want to cut out weed and alcohol. And then it was like let's see if I can get my abs back. And it was like let's see if I can do 5 push-ups, 10 push-ups, and doing all of it. And it's like I did it. And like here I'm sitting completely healthy. All my bills are paid. It's a lovely Monday. Went to the gym, went and got groceries. I have running water. And it does, I'm just flat. And I don't know what to do.
Something Eben often says is that when people have a spiritual hole in them, that you can't fill that spiritual hole with material, uh, alcohol, whatever, substances, work,
Right.
love, relation, some type,
Yeah, any addiction.
relationships. So what you need to fill it with is spiritual matter. And so I don't know where you are with your meditation, with checking in, with feeling gratitude in your heart and, feeling that connection with something greater. I don't know where you are with any of that. You haven't mentioned it, but that spiritual matter is what fills you. And spiritual matter is anything you do to help others, anything you do to, love yourself, anything you do that fits the golden rule, treating others as you would like to be treated. So now that you've kind of gotten yourself into this successful spot, maybe now it's time to help others have that success themselves, or I'm just, you'll find it. I'm just throwing out
Yeah. But
possibilities.
I agree with what Karen is pointing out, and she recognizes it in me because frequently, if I hit this kind of a questioning place, I resort to meditation. I go right into meditation. As you know well, I use sacred acoustics, binaural beat brainwave entrainment. That's my way of getting really deep. I mean, I meditate every day anyway, but certainly when I'm feeling any kind of spiritual angst or kind of, not feeling like I'm really kind of engaging with the mission of my higher soul, but somehow I feel a little bit adrift, which happens, quite often. For me, meditation, going within, and meditation is always first and foremost a letting go of the kind of ego voice, so the little ego mind, the annoying roommate, as Michael Singer puts it, that voice in our head, and getting into that kind of hypnagogic space, kind of the dream space where you're sharing the one mind and just opening up. And often my intention or my question when I start a meditation, that my ego voice can make a statement. And often it'll just say, what do I need to know now? In this state of kind of feeling a little bit like I'm trying to do, donuts, driving around on ice or something like that. How do I get some traction and how do I get some engagement with what I feel is authentic kind of role of higher soul? And it pretty much always hinges on helping others and on making the world a better place.
And another way to do that too, you live in Maine, one of the most beautiful natural environments on the planet. And
Lovely state.
have you gone out and checked out the beautiful trees and the sun and how different plants are growing and appreciating little worms on the ground and all of that? All of that can kind of bring you back to that spiritual connection instead of just what you're doing every day.
Yeah, no, it's getting colder now, but no, I do walk around in meditation every single day.
Fantastic.
Every single day. It's part wake up, work out, hour of an audiobook, busy work, uh, 20 minutes weights, 10 minutes cardio, then in that chair, meditate for 30 minutes, kind of meditation to prayer, do the podcast and then even like with the show, I really go out of my way to like when I have on, veterans who are, trying to prevent veteran suicide. And it's because it's an entirely different dynamic than, let's just say, average suicide. Like, for
Yeah.
instance, my brother. And the reason I have the veteran guys on is because people like me, they want to be talked to like the way I want to be talked to, when it's like, hey, man, it's okay. Like, it's okay to ask for help, blah, blah, blah. And yet, and if you talk to these like not just military, I mean like special forces dudes, they're like, yeah, that doesn't fly. They're like, you gotta go kick down the door, and I'm like, that sounds awful. And they're like, it's the only thing that works. And so I'll try to give them that platform and connect them. I'm like, I don't know how to help you guys who do special forces stuff, but you guys can help each other. And I give them the platform, and they're always thankful for that. There's another guy I have on all the time, Baz. He runs ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. He's a former Special Forces guy. He started this thing in 1993. It's where they go and physically rescue trafficked children. It's not awareness. It's not take a quiz. It's armed dudes going and kicking down doors all around the world and physically liberating children. I have him on like every month, just tell everyone, please go to this. I put a little blip for his thing in every single episode I do, which I don't do that for anyone else.
Mhm.
All these little things, I try to always look at it. I'm like, if I die today, I don't want there to be any regrets on the podcast. Like a lot of it's fun, a lot of it's interesting. I want to make sure that something good came from it. So like I do that. And like I do the meditation and Sometimes the meditation starts and it's all about like, well, how do I want to grow the podcast? How do I want, and even just today, and you kind of read my mind. I was meditating and like how to grow these different revenue streams. How am I going to do this? And I just paused for a second. I went, that does nothing for me. I don't care. And I just dropped it and just sat there. And I felt better for those couple minutes than I have in the last week. It was just nothing's right or wrong. It's not good that it's cloudy. It's not bad that it's cloudy. It's cloudy. And just that also applies to thoughts. I have these depressive thoughts where I'm anxious, and it's like, okay, it's a song that's playing depression or anxiety, and it's there. And I don't know how to turn off the radio. What I don't have to do is sing along. What I don't have to do is play the air guitar. You can just let it be there. And man, for like a type A workaholic dude like me, that is not the answer I want to hear. It's like,
Okay, but that was just this morning.
yeah, it was right before the
That's
show.
your turning point.
Oh, it is?
It's a turning point for you. Eben just, yeah, because your meditation space can sometimes be used for creative, inspiration, but it shouldn't be a continuation of your work space,
Correct.
right? And so the fact that you stopped and said, no, don't do that, the fact that you were outside your comfort zone because you're like, this doesn't feel right how I should be doing, getting out of your comfort zone, changing your normal routine, do what Eben suggested, which is ask the universe and what do I need to know right now? And then wait for that answer instead of how do I do this? How do I do that? Giving the universe, what you want to do is different than allowing the universe to show you potentially what could be the next step. And I think this angst you're feeling might be that the sort of portentous kind of your intuition knowing that there's another step coming and it may be out of your comfort zone. And that's when you start to feel a little nervous. And I don't think there's any reason to not believe that you might be sort of precogging this coming. Because I've had that happen to me.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes Eben and I will go on when we used to travel a lot to do presentations, and he's the big star that everyone wants to talk to. And I'm just this girl he's bringing along. And that's how it felt a lot because that's how people would treat me as, wait, who are you?
Uh,
Why are you here? And so it got to be where we would be getting ready for a trip. We'd be in the airport going, and I would feel, oh my gosh, I feel really nervous. I don't know why I feel nervous. I wonder. And then after a time, I got to realize, oh, that meant that event was going to be there was going to be some little problem that came up. Maybe someone in the audience challenged me. And, this was just a reflection of my own insecurities, right? And these people were challenging me because I had this insecurity inside. And after a time, all of that went away and people stopped challenging me. And I stopped having the nervous feeling. Now, I still do occasionally have a nervous feeling when we're about to go somewhere and I think, uh-oh, I wonder what's going to happen. But to me now, it's just kind of like, now I'll be prepared. Now I'll know. And so I kind of recognize this routine. Think when we've spoken with you before, similar times you've kind of felt like, oh, and we say, oh, something's going to happen. And then you report, yep, something happened. So it's not easy to have those uneasy feelings. But when you're doing a really excellent job, at least of explaining how you differentiate the feelings as not bad things, they're just feelings.
And certainly one thing that my near-death experience taught me, 17 years ago, is that the challenges and hurdles and difficulties in life, and that includes illness and injury, and also these kind of feelings of angst we might have about what we're up to and, how does it measure up to kind of our soul growth. And that's all natural. Though that's why we don't live in a perfect world. The world is meant to have rough edges that invite us to come into growth. I love that old saying from Confucius, and I'm just paraphrasing here, but he said, if you find something objectionable in another, look inside yourself. And this is just kind of an acknowledgement that we're all sharing that one mind. We're all in this together. We're here to help learn and teach with each other. And it's the rough edges that are really the dynamic that kind of drive and energize that growth. And they necessitate some feeling of, something's off, something's not right. What am I needing here? What do I need to do? And I think you're expressing it beautifully that you're feeling a little bit of question. I mean, to me, the kind of work you do is fantastic. You invite the world to kind of grow into a higher state of being. You get interesting people to kind of talk about these challenges they've had and offer opportunities for, how other people might face similar challenges and end up growing from them. It's not getting rid of the challenges, but it's actually using their energy to help us grow into a better human being. I mean, life reviews in near-death experiences have been, discussed a lot more recently, and they have everything to do with acknowledging that we, in many ways, have kind of a responsibility and kind of an opportunity for growth here. But it's really accepting that higher soul challenge and using that to help other people and to grow into the souls we came here to be. And I would say that two incredibly important ingredients to that formula are gratitude and forgiveness. And I don't doubt that you have plenty of gratitude from, what you're telling us. You appreciate the good things you have in life. You appreciate that other people don't have those things. It seems to me you're using your podcast to help deliver this positive energy to others. But don't be surprised that you feel some angst and challenge around it all. But just remember, gratitude and forgiveness, forgiving others and forgiving self are beautiful tools to help us grow into the souls we came here to be.
And just to add to that, you brought up gratitude and forgiveness, but when we talk about spirituality, what that means to us is connection, meaning, and purpose. And so sometimes we forget that we have those things in our life and we think, oh, well, it's not meaningful enough. It needs to be a better purpose than what I'm really doing. But when the things that you just rattled off about helping children who've been trafficked get rescued, the
Yeah.
veterans, helping them from taking their own lives. That's some of the highest meaning and purpose people could have in this world. And so I just want to remind you of that. And we don't have to be solving all the world's problems. We just need to solve one, right? There's billions of us on this planet. We don't need to solve all the problems. But if each of us would just solve one, wouldn't that be wonderful? And you're doing that. And so just to remind you, you do have meaning and purpose in your life that maybe you don't put as much significance onto as you could. And we all go there. We're like, oh, well, that's not good enough. What do you mean? I should be doing something more. And that's good too, because we're just being driven to do more. But we also don't want to dismiss or minimize the things that we are doing that are appreciated in this world. And you certainly seem to embody that golden rule that we feel is the really fundamental lesson for everyone. Because, like Eben said, when you go through your life review, when you die, you relive the perspective of every experience from the other person's point of view. And so this is, as Eben says, written into the fabric of our universe. And so living that golden rule, why do we wait till the end of our lives to find out, oh, I should have done that? No, let's start doing it now. I love how you're in your 30s and you're already so aware of these kinds of things, because we certainly were not in our 30s. I was somewhere along the line. But many of us in our generation, we take longer to get there. And seeing younger generations already there, don't minimize the accomplishment that you've already achieved. And I know that this is just a foundation for so much more. And that is what remains to be seen. But that's part of the challenge in your 30s. I remember being so frustrated. What is my purpose? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? Tell me, tell me, tell me. And like you in meditation, sort of making demands for what is it? Just tell me. And it was very unsuccessful approach. And I really just had to relax into it and just trust. That's a word you could take into meditation. Trust. Trust that everything will unfold as you have planned on one level, your higher soul, I mean. Those plans aren't really known to us until they start to become enacted. And I remember being very frustrated in my 30s, especially, and maybe early 40s. Why isn't it happening sooner? I'm ready. I'm ready. I know I'm ready. And the truth is, I really wasn't until the things started happening. And you don't recognize that until you look back. And, that's where decades of life on Earth help. but you've got three and a half of them. So you're well on your way.
But you
And
have plenty ahead of you.
but you have plenty ahead of you. And I feel like your foundation is just so amazing. And
Solid.
thinking that you have at least another 35 years on this planet, how in the world are you supposed to know necessarily what's next? So a lot can happen. Technology changes, you know, problems in the world we become more aware of them as time goes on. We can't necessarily know, that AI was in our future necessarily, or, all of the things that start to come about. I never knew when I wanted to be a magazine publisher that the internet was going to come along and destroy all of the magazines and that information was going to be delivered in a whole new way. And I had to kind of grow with that. And it wasn't easy. These were my plans. What do you mean print is dead? This can't be. And so, that's probably going to happen with you at some point where you'll be faced with new challenges that we can't even imagine right now. But your foundation you should be ultimately proud of. So,
And the only other thing I'd add is the message that I gave my family when I first came out of coma. And they spent a whole week with the doctors telling them with a severe case of bacterial meningitis. I started out with a 10% chance of survival by the end of 7 days in deep coma, down to a 2% chance of survival. So my family, when they were advised to just take me off the ventilator and take me off the antibiotics and let me go. And it was soon thereafter I started coming back to this world. But as I did, they also recognized that it was not going to be that easy. My brain appeared to be quite wrecked, and yet I was sitting there on the bed within 30 minutes of them taking out the breathing tube, and I was looking everyone around me, family, friends, doctors, nurses, and I would look them in the eye and say, "Don't worry, all is
All's
well."
well.
And that's how I often sign the book Proof of Heaven when I sign it to people. All is well.
but his
Now,
family thought he was nuts because all was not well from their
right.
perspective.
And yet
Yeah.
all was well from my perspective. And I could see where it was going. And I think the important message there is when you come to acknowledge that the challenges and hardships and difficulties are there for a purpose, they're there to help you. But it's growth. Soul growth that's required, not just kind of a complacent sitting around and thinking everything is hunky-dory, but it's making progress in who you are and how you interact with the world. And in that sense, if you gain that bigger kind of viewpoint, which I think for me is greatly offered through meditation, it allows me to realize, even though those hardships seem to be fairly daunting in life, that in many ways, as long as I'm aware of them and if I'm doing the soul work to try and make the world better through addressing those challenges, then all is well, because then I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing with that energy. I don't have to have regrets about some of the things going on, but just say, look, you're trying to deal with it, you're trying to make it better.
I'll give you one more example. When I was in the habit of learning to meditate, I'll say sometimes when I would go into meditation, I was in complete control of things. I would state my intention and sort of guide the experience. Other times, I would start to cry, and I would think, "Oh my God, this is going to be ruined. I guess I just have to cry." And then after a while, I realized, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm crying. And I got excited. I was like, this means I'm going to have a breakthrough today. And at first I wanted to avoid it. And then I looked forward to it. And I never knew when I would happen to tap into some emotion. But what I realized was that those emotions wanted to come out. And those were my opportunities to allow them to come out. And I learned to look forward to those moments instead of, want to avoid them. And so that might be possibly what your anxiety episodes are offering you. Um, and I think we've said that in many kind of
Different
different
ways.
ways, but that was just another metaphor to compare.
Yeah, it's the creative thing in meditation. I've often used that and kind of fully aware of like that's what I'm doing when I'm trying to look outside the box and how do I grow the podcast. And it is very helpful to slow down and it's kind of like the notepad next to your bed because you wake up with the idea. That's what creative meditation is like to me. But then there is the point where I also realize that it's still that is work. Like I'm doing work. Like I'm slowing down my breath and trying to become aware that I am conscious and with the miracle of consciousness and what is existence and why is there something rather than nothing. And it's like, and I'm using that omnipotent God love feeling to like plan out podcasts. I'm like, I don't think that's the way to like to use this ethereal divine communion with the eternal is, how do I make the thumbnails more attractive? So sometimes I try to drop that and I'm like, what is and just and it's the antithesis of like everything I do of it's not something that I can brute force my way through. It's the
Hmm.
exact opposite. It's
Hmm.
get
Right.
completely quiet and okay, well, I know I'm gonna I know you can't even think of the goal and it doesn't make sense. It's like if to get to a destination with your GPS, like what you really have to do is not type anything in. And it's like if you did that, somebody would be like, that's not how GPS works. But like what if that is how it worked? Like if you just stopped worrying about where you were going, would a destination appear? And it's extremely counterintuitive and it's something I'm trying to do more of. But and I wanted to ask you, Dr. Alexander, is how much do you draw back on not necessarily, day-to-day meditation, but specifically your time in the coma? And the two things I mean, I read the book, I believe, in 2020, so I'm a little hazy, but the two things I really that I just still remember is when you were like above like a green field and you said there was like angels or something like farther ahead than higher up than stars, like higher, just unimaginable. Like if the Earth's atmosphere went on for instead of 100 miles, if it went on for a million. I don't know why I always remember that. And then kind of the core, where it was like the event horizon of rational understanding. Like that was is God. How much do you still draw on that as opposed to just kind of current works? And how much do you try to get back to that?
Well, I would say that I frequently refer back to it as kind of a reference point. But my meditation has moved far beyond just, using deep meditation to recover memories of the near-death experience and moved well on to developing relationships with the guidance and intelligence and God force of love that is so creative and energizing for anybody who's had a near-death experience. But, anybody who meditates or uses centering prayer can certainly get to the same space. But I use it really to evolve my soul work. We tell a little bit of that story in the third book, in Living in a Mindful Universe, where I talk about reconnecting with the soul of my adoptive father, who had passed over 4 years before my coma. Um, but was nowhere to be seen in my near-death experience. And it was only when I encountered his soul 2.5 years after my coma, where he made it very clear to me in this thought ball of kind of understanding that if he had been my spiritual guide, in spite of the fact that I had a 1 in 10 million diagnosis of E. coli meningitis in an adult, in spite of a 1 in a billion recovery, if my adoptive father had been the soul guide or spirit guide, I might have been a little more tempted. The materialist neuroscientist in me would have been a little more tempted to say, "Oh, you just see who you want to see on the way out," and therefore dismissing it. In spite of the ultra reality, which was kind of impossible to dismiss, but there was that scientific part of me that was trying to explain it. And often, the short circuit of explaining is explaining away and ignoring the data. And that's why I think this vision of my father 2.5 years after coma, who made it very clear to me. In fact, I remember as he put it in this thought ball of understanding, there was the word apparent. He could not be apparent to me. That is, he couldn't be seen, but he also couldn't be the father figure because I would have been more likely to dismiss it. And that's why the universe instead had that spiritual guide be someone I didn't know from life, but someone who was very, very important to me. And that was a birth sister from my birth family who had passed over 2 years before I even found out about her existence, 10 years before my coma. And all of that then started to make tremendous sense to me and kind of opened me up to it. But that was through a meditative vision. And that was through going in deep meditation where I completely open the gates to whatever the universe needs to show me in that moment. My little ego voice, the, annoying roommate in the head, that little voice in your head, that was gone because I've learned in meditation to use the tones of sacred acoustics to release that voice and therefore kind of connect much more ambitiously with higher soul and that connection to primordial God force at the core of all of our conscious awareness. So to me, it's an ongoing exercise of engagement with that spiritual realm. And this is where anybody and everybody can do this. You don't need,
Except
yeah,
you just told us when you came out of your coma,
uh-huh,
everyone's freaking out because you were almost dead and now you're suddenly sitting up and you're like, all is well. All is well. What you have that the rest of us don't have is this deep trust,
you're right. Trust is the
complete,
key word.
utter, whole trust. And that's why I suggested trust as a place for you to start in meditation. Just the word trust. Like go into your meditation and say, I trust, and see if you can develop that feeling of trust. Because I think once we have that trust, that's when the universe is like, well, okay, then let me just come in and help you out. And that trust is very elusive to a lot of us because we're a little nervous sometimes. We're like, wait, no, how can I trust? I'm in charge, and you kind of have to find that co-creative spirit between your soul and the universe, I'll just call it, that can help you out. And that trust is not so simple for the rest of us to find, but that's the reference point I think he goes back to.
Right.
It's just feeling that connection, that trust, that feeling that he's going to be taken care of.
Right.
And he knows he's going to be taken care of. He's not just kind of saying it. It's so deep in him.
Well,
So,
yeah, I would like 90% of people who've had near-death experiences going back thousands of years across all cultures and belief systems, and many of these were previously atheist or agnostic people. But after an NDE, they come back with that tremendous trust that Karen is talking about. And it's a trust that comes in the form of knowing the reality of a loving God force at the core of the universe.
whatever they call
And I
it.
don't want
Yeah.
anybody to start thinking this is about religious ideology because that force is far beyond the labels of God, Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, Great Spirit, Tao, all the many, many labels humans have attached to that incredible perception of that force of love that contributes to our well-being. It's God force. I mean, that's what I call it. People can call it many different things, but after an NDE, you come back not only believing in that, but knowing it from personal experience. And this is why Karen and I encourage people so strongly in our workshops, to meditate, to put that little ego voice aside. Because the ego is always there ready to support addictions and other problems in life. But there's part of you that can rise well above that ego as you come to see yourself as that higher soul. And that higher soul is one that has a direct connection with that God force of love. And when people experience that in meditation and centering prayer, it starts to give them the personal energy and ability to acknowledge that force as something that's very real and active in their lives. That's the trust that Karen is talking about. And you don't have to have an NDE to get that trust.
It just takes a little longer.
But you certainly need to escape the reign of that monkey mind, ego voice in the head. That is not your friend. And that is right there. Addictions are all through and through interrelated with that ego and its impossible demands, often related to baby wounds, things that we might have been told when we were young children. You're not good enough. Nobody cares what you think. The kind of messages we can absorb as children that then become templates that can, lead us into trouble in kind of more freely living these lives as a higher soul. So I think just having this kind of acknowledgement of that dynamic, that the voice in your head, the ego mind, is not your ally. Addictions are always there to kind of trip people up. And yet we can rise above them. And Karen, in her mention of trust, a very crucial concept that I think offers people the ability to kind of break through that impasse. I mean, I know people who go their whole life without making progress against their egotistical narcissism or what have you. And it's sad. They never really see that bigger kind of mission and capability within to help others and be of service and to make the world a better place. And as opposed to being, a prisoner of their own ego through narcissism and sociopathic behavior and things like that. This is a way to connect with your higher soul, acknowledge the power of mind over matter and the reality of our free will, and use that for personal soul growth, coming to a deeper recognition of why we're here, and then taking the steps to help others, taking the steps to bring goodness and love and forgiveness and gratitude to this world. And that's why someone with, I think, your position, as a podcaster with a real authentic heart to you, I mean, that's apparent. Um, you can do a lot of good for this world, and it doesn't surprise me that you hit these little islands of kind of self-doubt. And is this really going the way I want it to
It's
go?
good news,
It's good.
actually.
It is good news, and I think that is what is ultimately going to drive your higher soul to connect even more powerfully with that primordial mind, that God force of love, and start to bring some real healing to your listeners.
And what Karen said about trust is I mean, I've obviously missed some days, but almost every day since 2008, I've meditated. And from being like Christian through atheist through agnostic through I don't even know what, and then back to believing in God is despite doing it every day, I've had maybe 5 occasions over 2 decades where you go so deep inside and it just deeper than what you thought was possible, or even the concept of space. And I know you guys know it all drops away. And at that very core, no, and it's the same feeling. It's not only are you safe right now, you've never been unsafe. Nothing has ever been unsafe.
Mhm.
Everything is good. Everything is exact. It's not even that it's, hey, you're gonna make it through. It is every puzzle piece in the universe. There's not a proton in the wrong spot in the wrong galaxy. There's not a grain of dust in the Amazon rainforest that's out of place. Like all of it is just perfect. And you come out of that and I mean you feel I've never done it, but I would imagine that's what, heroin must feel like. You just like
I don't
you
know.
come, I don't know.
I don't
I'm
think
not trying,
so.
and I'm
No,
not
I
trying to
can
get,
get that's a little
I
different.
I'm
think
not
the
trying just for the,
other,
I don't mean to condone, obviously not, but my point is
yeah.
the idea of indescribable, like, oh my God, it's okay.
So you
And,
have the reference point.
what I was going to say is, and now I know it happened and I've had those, but once it fades and it's been years since the last one, now I don't feel it in my bones. Like I know it's there in the same way. Like I don't know. It's October and it's starting to get cold, but sometimes it's still warm and it feels like it's still summer. Like I know it's fall. I don't feel it yet, and then fall comes in. Now I feel it. I can't feel it in my like. I know it's there. I've been
Well,
there,
that
completely
would be a
sober.
goal to rediscover that feeling and know how to get to that more when you want to, at your will, and not just when it just happens. That might be a goal for you.
To just let it, yeah, and I really, I wouldn't soil my analogy by saying heroin. It probably wasn't the best example, but my point was just like it's okay. It's just okay. And yeah, I so desperately try to get back there. And but Karen, what you were saying about the tears, you get excited because it means something's changing. And yeah, I don't think I'm there yet. Like I
Yeah.
can definitely, I got it the day before my brother took his life, and then two other occasions that are much more private and we won't talk about, but 3 times in my life where the day before, just unimaginable, like anxiety, something bad, and then it happens, and so
Mhm.
I've come to grow to hate those because whenever those happen, it's
Yeah.
like
something
I
bad.
lose someone.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't, and then back to what we were saying before we started recording about, it's scripted. And then on the other hand, when I look back at not even just my life, but just like the life of the podcast and how it got from episode one to here in terms of different ways it's grown, different guests I've had, the way it's earned money and lost money and shaped me. It has been such like a roller coaster is too kind of an analogy because that's at least like built and screwed in. This is it's a rock rolling down Mount Everest. And yet at any point I can look back and go, yeah, but man, it's brought me right to this point and it's been perfect. And then as if I have complete amnesia, I then look forward and go, this is also wrong. I'm dead.
Mm.
Like with no irony do I look at it like, nope, it's you're fine. And that's where I am right now. Like I know I'll look back on this in a week or a month or an hour or a year and be like, oh yeah, because that and then this and then led to that and oh, it's just perfect.
Mhm.
And I know that, but no part of me feels it. And I think that's maybe where the trust thing comes in is
And that phrase, all is well, that's
Yeah,
another
all is
way
well
to
is a
tap into it
beautiful way of kind
many
of
ways. It,
resonating with that truth. Yeah.
and you had some beautiful analogies too that you just described. All the puzzles fit together, all the pieces, and you had the beautiful words to describe it. It doesn't have to be the word trust, but just all is well, all is in order, all is it's
As
all
it
meant.
should be.
Yeah, and it's not like you don't have free will within that kind of plan, I'll say. It's a hard word to use too, but because we're part of the plan and the plan is evolving, the plan continues to evolve. But there is a plan, the scriptedness of it all. What we said before the recording was our dear friend Raymond Moody, who's when he turned 80 years old, he told us, oh my gosh, when you turn 80, you can, or maybe it was when he was 70. I think it was 80 though. He
Huh.
said you can look back on your life and see it almost seemed scripted, like a movie, like a first act, a second act, a third act, but you don't see it
When
until
you're living it.
you're right. You don't see it when you're living it.
Yeah.
He certainly did not, but he can look back at his life with a whole new perspective and appreciation for the challenges that he went through. And even losing a loved one, is so, so challenging. But even that can set us onto a trajectory we might not have gone on before. We know someone who's a emergency room doctor, and he lost his brother at a very young age. But what that did for him now when he looks back is it opened up his spiritual eyes. And as an emergency room doctor, he could see people who had died, walking around the emergency room, giving him messages and different kind of situations. But it was the loss of his brother that really gave him that ability and the eventual helping of so many other people. Because having that ability alone is a little bit unnerving, I would say, because especially as a doctor, who do you tell what's going on here? They're going to, fire you or something. But fortunately, there was a nurse on staff that
Also.
they figured out that they had the same ability and could confide in each other, and that was really helpful. But there was this horrible tragedy as a child, that kind of destroyed him on one level, that turned him into a different person.
Well, and it was connection with that brother who had left the physical world that showed him the reality of the spiritual realm.
Right.
And it reminds me that when I first started giving talks about my experience, and I started those talks in 2010. So that was 2 years after the experience, but 2 years before the book Proof of Heaven came out. And people would often come up to me after a talk and they'd say, well, I've never told anybody this before, but, and then they'd share a story like that of a loved one who left, who then afterwards they realized they still had a soul connection, that their spirit wasn't gone, that it was still connected. And they would tell me that the greatest gift their loved one had ever given them was that specific knowledge that after bodily death that they were still available. And so it's a very, very common story out there. after death communications, deathbed visions, even shared death experiences, which are like near death but happen in perfectly healthy people. Um, and all of these are just demonstrations that our souls are eternal and our connectedness, our connections with loved ones do not end with the death of a physical body. And that's a very liberating and refreshing thing to come into knowing. And when you get it through personal experience, it sticks, it's real. And that's what these people were trying to tell me. It took me a while to figure out some of them, like shared death experiences, where you might be 1,000 miles away from the loved one who's dying, and yet their soul comes through, grabs your soul, the bystander soul, even to the point of witnessing a full-blown life review before letting the bystander soul come back to this world. And these kinds of revelations, when they're a personal experience discovery, can change your life completely. And this is why it's good to be open to this stuff. It's good to be kind of willing to open to trusting in the universe, as Karen pointed out earlier. But there are tremendous lessons in all of this. And for any of the scientific members of your audience who want scientific proof of the afterlife, I would steer them to bigelowinstitute.org, where you have 29 essays that make it crystal clear that the scientific evidence supports this spiritual reality.
And could you, because I think I know to a degree the shared death. I mean, obviously the night before I lost my brother. Um, Yeah, and there's like other weird. I remember the night before, like my grandma died. She had been, healthy, and it was the weirdest dream that like I was on the moon and she was on the moon, and I was in a spacesuit. She didn't have a helmet, and she couldn't breathe. And like I woke up that morning. I was visiting my little brother, and he was like, "Hey, we got to drive to New Jersey. Like Mimi's like in the process of dying." And I'd never. It's not like I had that dream every night. I never had it before, and then that happened, and and especially with my brother, almost seeing it happen despite being 600 miles away. And
Mhm.
you're right, it's regardless of what the action is or how sad or scary or whatever, the fact that it happened at all, it's like the first phone call between whatever Graham Bell, like
Mhm.
whether it was something nice or whether it was the meanest thing he'd ever heard, he'd kind of be psyched to be like, oh, it works. Like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And I try to remember that like those experiences imply a reality far beyond our current knowledge and maybe any knowledge we could ever attain. And I was gonna ask you, or I guess both of you, um, at what point? Because I don't know. Like I saw something yesterday, but some astrophysicist was trying to explain that the universe didn't have a beginning; it was just here forever, and and going on and on and on. And somebody commented, they're like, how many steps do you have to go out of your way to just not to not explain God?
Right.
At what point are you going so far out of your way to be like, hey man, like this is no longer Occam's razor. Like God is more probable than this. With your direct experience, especially, and that's whenever I refer to you, I always say like not just some random dude, like Harvard brain surgeon. How much of it do you look at and you just know you can't weigh it, you can't measure it, you can't take a picture of it, you can't, I mean, sure you can do brain scans and, different, electrical waves, but how much of it do you just look at and go, you'll never be able to explain it. If you can explain it, then it's not the thing we're talking about.
Well, I think certainly the scientific world is stepping up to the plate to try and help the rest of us come to a deeper understanding of this. And there's a project that I've been associated with and working on passionately now for a few years that started with a very good friend of ours in Paris. Um, and that project is basically providing a proof of God in a very scientific sense. And that's exactly what's happening now in the book. In fact, comes out tomorrow in the United States. It's called God, the Proof, the Evidence. It's been published in French. In fact, I think it sold 400,000 copies in Europe.
Tomorrow being October 14th,
October 14th of
2025. Yeah.
2025 is the publication date for this specific book. And I gave a talk a few weeks ago at part of the launch ceremony for it. It was at Princeton University. I actually spoke in the Einstein room, which is where Einstein used to deliver lectures. And
And
of
they've
course,
preserved it to
and they
that
preserved
time.
it to it's like it was when he was there giving lectures there. So it was a tremendous honor for me to be doing that. But this book is very powerful. And it points out, I won't go into a lot of detail because there's much to it, but the reality is they use Big Bang cosmology. You got to realize that at the beginning of the 20th century, scientists assumed the universe had always been as it is stable, just eternally existent as it is. And then Hubble, the astronomer, discovered that galaxies were flying apart. The further away they were, the faster they were moving. And in fact, if you run that backwards, you get to a point 13.77 billion years ago where the universe started. Now, that knowledge came to us through Hubble in the 1920s and 30s. And there were scientists in both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union who were imprisoned and executed for sharing the scientific truth of Big Bang cosmology. The reason was it implied a creation event to the universe 13.77 billion years ago, and therefore greatly supported the notion of a creator God. Now, that's just the beginning of the argument. And one of the strongest pieces of the argument in this book, God, the Proof, the Evidence, is what's called the fine tuning of physical constants. That is, things like the charge of an electron, the mass of a quark, things like this. They're like 26 of fundamental constants that have to do with the structure of this universe, fine structure constants, speed of light, things like that. Um, and the interesting thing is the chances that they would be just the right value to support this universe we have are so minuscule that you have to admit that these constants are selected to let intelligent life form in the universe. Stars, planets,
In
you know,
intelligent design,
yeah,
basically.
intelligent
Yeah,
design is the general rubric.
not
And
random.
and in fact, Roger Penrose, who is a Nobel Prize winning physicist who certainly understands a lot about consciousness, quantum physics, and all that interrelationship and cosmology, he estimates that the chances that all of these numbers would be just in the range to support intelligent life in the universe is less than 1 over 10 to the 10 to the 123rd power. And that just for to give you that number, that denominator is more than the number of subatomic particles in the known universe. So it's less than one part per all those particles that these numbers of the physical constants would all be just right to support stars, planets, intelligent life. And, intelligent design is a very realistic answer to that. Now, they're only arguing in this book for kind of the God of Spinoza. That would be a creative, intelligent God. They're not trying to make an argument necessarily that God has like a personal investment in us, like power of prayer and our free will.
That's harder to prove
That's
scientifically.
harder to prove
Yeah, but we
scientifically,
know
yet it
from,
emerges richly
yeah.
from human experience, like near-death experiences, after-death communications, deathbed visions, of all of these big pieces of consciousness beyond the brain are pointing out to us that God force seems to have a very real interest in us individually, and that prayer does have power. Larry Dossey wrote a beautiful book called Healing Words that makes that case very elegantly. But there is emerging very rich scientific proof for the reality of this loving, intelligent force at the core of the universe. And those BigelowInstitute.org essays help support all of that in a very scientific sense. I would say we're getting close to a point. There's an old saying from Nikola Tesla, the man who basically gave us our modern electrified world, coming up with ways to transmit alternating current, etc. But Nikola Tesla said he had a very profound spiritual experience around the passing of his mother in the 1940s when he was in New York City trying to be with her and had this incredible vision the night that she passed.
Like yours.
Yeah, exactly. Incredible vision. But he ended up, this beautiful quote from Tesla, is that when science first begins to investigate non-physical phenomena, they will discover more in the first decade than all the previous centuries of scientific existence.
Except for non-physical phenomena can't be measured, as you pointed
Right.
out, Tommy. And that's where, they don't talk about this love, this kind of connection. They only talk about things that can be measured, like the constants. And there's enough of those. But when personal experience shows over and over and over again, people are touching love when they almost die. And in the actual death setting, in the hospice setting, when that has been studied, they're touching love. Everyone who's in the experience in the process of dying has is 99% of them in the study anyway had these incredibly vivid visions or dreams. They called them dreams when they looked like they were asleep. They called them visions when they looked like they were awake, but they were hyper real lived events to the people having them. And they were all about establishing those bonds of love as they were in the process of dying. And so love seems to be, at least from human reports, the sort of the fabric that connects us all together. So when Eben talks about the one mind, I think, no, it's the one heart because it's connecting us through this love. When he talks about the consciousness of the universe, I think about the love of the universe. But it's really the same thing. And it just depends on who's talking and who's listening, how those words are received.
Right.
But
According to
love is it.
Yeah, according to
So
near-death experiencers, it's that ocean of love. That's what changes your mind. That's what makes you realize you can trust in that God force of the universe. And it's a beautiful gift to share. And that's why I love that near-death experiencers bring that back to this world. But as Karen was pointing out, that beautiful work by Christopher Kerr, the head of Hospice Buffalo in New York.
his book is Death is But a Dream,
Yeah, it came out about 7 years ago, but that particular book,
5 years ago.
okay. But in that book, 86% of the people he investigated, and he looked at it prospectively. So that's a huge number to take.
86 had the
Yeah,
experience.
86% had the experience. But what Karen was referring to is 99% of those who had an experience said it was more real than anything they'd ever lived
Not
before.
a dream,
So these are
lived
not
event.
dreams or hallucinations
Yeah.
at all.
I'll write that down. You said
Yeah,
death.
Death is But a Dream by Christopher Kerr. It's excellent work, and it's all about hospice and palliative care.
And it's interesting because Dr. Kerr, as a hospice doc, was very interested in helping people feel comfortable as they were dying and wanting to know more about what they were experiencing. And so he got the Yale Institution Review Board to allow him to interview dying patients. First time that had ever happened. Other studies like this was observations of clinicians or family members, hospice workers, but he asked the patients. And it was really amazing to hear when I read the book, he basically, people will ask us, how do we know what happens in near-death experiences is really what happens when you die? And everything I read in Dr. Kerr's book validated what happens in near-death experiences. Really, 100%. It was rather unbelievable. And when we met Dr. Kerr, that was not his goal of writing the book. He didn't want to know about near-death experiences, had no interest in them. He had no idea that he was validating them. And he didn't want to know about them for scientific reasons. He didn't want to be influenced. He wanted to just learn what he learned in his setting and let other people draw the connections between the two. And that's
Yeah.
what I've tried to do.
Yeah, and his work was just focused prospectively, which is very important in scientific studies because it gives you much stronger platform to make statements when you select a group of people and then march them all forward and see how many of them have the experience. That's very different from working backwards and saying, well, I want to just have
An experience.
yeah,
Now tell me about it.
yeah, no, this is scientifically far more powerful when you take a whole group of people moving forward. And these were all people who were going to die. I mean, they were in hospice and palliative care. But then to be able to make that kind of a statement that 86% of them had these extraordinary dreams and visions, and of that group, pretty much all of them, 99%, said it was more real than anything they'd ever experienced in this life. So it's a giant mistake of materialist neuroscientists to pretend that these are just dreams and hallucinations of no value.
What's really cool, I thought, is one of the things that happens is they start going through a life review. They start revisiting events from the past. Most of them are related to loving close relationships. And for those people who had already passed on, they actually return. The deceased loved ones start to show up to help take them to their next stage. They think they're going on a journey. They do not think that it's the end. They don't know where they're going. But those life reviews start. And it's a little bit disconcerting when he talks about the less than pleasant life reviews. For example, the most extreme one was a man he called Eddie, who was a dirty cop. And he admitted, he said he planted evidence that shouldn't have been there. He beat up suspects when he shouldn't have, and all of the things we hear about. And he felt horribly guilty. And he was having all of these horrific nightmares. And yet one level of him knew that he was learning. And they thought for 36 hours he hadn't woken up. They thought he was just going to pass on, but he woke up right before he died. His daughter was there. And he said, "Oh my gosh, I've seen your mother. Everything is fine." And, his mother is someone he had cheated on. She had died earlier. I mean, sorry, it was his daughter's mother, his wife. She had had breast cancer and died earlier. But he had to face all of those wrongdoings that he had done and make amends somehow. And we can't know from this side what actually he was going through. But he was making amends, most certainly, for and having to feel the pain that he caused others. And this is why we really encourage people to do this now. Make amends now. Admit your wrongdoings, forgive other people, forgive yourself for your own wrongdoings. Find a way. This is something that happens in AA, right? Where
Absolutely.
step one of the 10, I don't know, you know better than me,
12 steps.
12 steps.
Right. But it's about forgiveness, and certainly self-forgiveness
And
comes into
making
that.
amends with
Making
people.
amends with others, very critical. It's also I mean, the serenity prayer, to have the courage to change the things you can, the serenity to recognize you can't change everything, but there are certain things you have the power to change. And the serenity prayer is asking for courage to do that. So it's really kind of an admission of the things that you can control in life, which is basically your own behavior and your own attitudes. But to do it all with love and connection and compassion for others and for making life better for all.
And two things. What was the book coming out tomorrow?
It's called God, the Proof, the Evidence. And it's the last names of the authors, Eve, Yves dash
No, it's Michel Yves
Michel E.
Laurent.
Yes.
No, not Laurent. Is he?
Sorry.
We can't remember. It's a French
No,
name. And Olivier
Uh,
Durand.
no,
We don't know their last name.
sorry.
no,
We
no,
know their
no,
first
you're
names
fine.
are Michel, Yves, and Olivier.
Right.
Good.
Poisson or something like that.
And then I was going to ask, I think just as an example, I forget when I saw it, but it was like Michael Jordan in his prime in the locker room or something, and he's like talking to whoever, and he's like, "Yeah," he's like, "I'm terrible." Like, he's like, I got the butterflies." And it was like a game in the middle of the season. It wasn't like the championship, and he's the greatest player that ever lived. And they're like, "You're nervous?" And he's like, "Oh, every game, I'm still so nervous." And so I was gonna kind of ask that of you guys. Like, when I have you guys on, I feel like I'm just talking to much wiser versions of me, and in a weird way, it does help to see. And you obviously don't have to divulge anything if you don't want. Have either of you recently, or at any point relatively recently, just had like a really tough time? The point that kind of, because that's what makes Michael Jordan seem more. You go, oh, he's just a dude. He's much better at basketball than me, but he's still just a dude, and that makes them less on a pedestal. And you're like, oh, I can strive to be that too. So when I see you guys, I'm like, I almost need to see like what are weaknesses, or what you
Like we
perceive to
must
be
have been through something.
what, or
Yeah.
like or what you perceive to be as flaws. Like, is there something that can almost like bring you down a notch, if that's the right way to word it?
Well, you asked a couple questions there. I
Personal anxieties are like, yeah, Tommy, I just last week I kind of, I had a freak out, or I cried or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I've been through a lot through relationships. I'm the kind of person who accepts responsibility for everything that's happening. And so I like to think that that makes me more in control of what's going on, to accept responsibility. I'm nobody's victim. But I found that that also makes me vulnerable to people who are controlling, because when they say, "Oh, you shouldn't feel that way," I listened to them. Oh, what should I be doing different? I don't want to displease you. So I went through several relationships like that, and it all came to a head for me during COVID, like many things did. Boy, was I faced with some of my what I call baby wounds. And I remember lying on the floor, just kind of moaning, because my body likes to process my emotions. And I'll start to tremble. And I used to stop myself from trembling. I'd say, stop that, or crying. And now I just let it happen. And it hasn't happened like that since about 2021, I would say, a few years back. But I was laying there on the floor, just kind of moaning, and Eben was very concerned. And thank goodness I feel safe around him to allow myself to just go through that, because I wouldn't have done that. I would have to have been alone. But having him here was so very helpful. And I remember him saying, he was getting kind of concerned. And I think he said, are you okay? Or something. And I said, it was very strange, because my observer self kicked in and said, "Oh, I think I'm through the worst of it. I feel like I'm now coming down from it. Just let me
Reassured.
keep moaning." And part of me knew what was going on. And that wouldn't have happened, say, 10 years earlier,
Mm.
going through something like that. So the growth of having to be triggered, I guess, by external events, these inner sort of flaws, we'll just call them wounds. Outside events trigger them. And when I get triggered like that, I realize, oh, I guess I'm not finished. I thought I had it all under control, but there's still this person in my life that I'm allowing to treat me this way. And it's making me feel very badly. And so I must now reestablish my boundary and let go of all of this nonsense. And it still happened again somewhat recently in a much lesser form. But I realized I need to keep my wits about me. I need to keep my boundaries firm, or I'm going to end up back into that little puddle on the floor. And it's my boundaries that need to be. I was called inflexible. And I said, yes, I do feel inflexible. But later I realized, no, that's my boundary. That's actually, that inflexibility to me is a very good thing. And so I didn't mind being called inflexible, because I felt rather inflexible, but not in a bad way. And the old me might have said, yes, I need to change myself to make this person happy. But now I can no longer do that. And when I run up against those kind of conflicts, I still have those kind of triggers to remind me. And I come to think of them as my intuitive knowledge. When I have that feeling, it's my body saying, Karen, pay attention. Don't let this happen. Don't let yourself go there. And so paying attention to those signs that you're having, I think, is really important. And I used to think they were bothersome, but now I think they're helpful clues. And one example of that relationship that I was in, when this man first told me that he loved me, I felt nauseous. I felt nauseous. And I thought, wow, I guess I'm just not very good at receiving someone's love. When in fact, after I went through a 14-year relationship with this person, I realized it was a warning sign. Don't go there. And it takes that long to figure these things out. 14 years of growth and development. And, like you, things were going well. My job was great. But this relationship thing was, I thought, my opportunity for growth, to learn how to love. And I thought it was to love him better, when really it was, no, that's not real. That's not the kind of love that you need. It was when I met Eben that everything felt right. For the very first time in my life, when we encountered each other, that did not make me feel nauseous. It made me feel safe. It made me feel like I was at home. It made me feel more whole. It was completely different feeling than trying to, oh, I must have a problem I need to work through. Instead, it was, no, when you meet the right person, you don't have that problem. So that's some of my kind of personal angst and growth that
Thank you.
I've been through.
Thank you. And
Hmm.
it's Dr. Alexander, do you have any you'd want to add?
Well, I would just say, I'm still a work in progress. I've grown tremendously from my NDE, but I'm far from where I think my soul is headed, for me. Um, And for example, I find myself frustrated by what I see as injustices in the world today. And there is quite a bit of that out there. The war, the violence, the uh, plight of refugees, things like this. I really support the beauty and sacred divinity of every soul. And so when I see people being downtrodden, people being abused by other people and by systems, and see corporate greed and see any kind of
But
injustices. To me, it causes a little angst in my own being, and I like to try and do whatever I can to try and alleviate some of
but
that.
your struggle stems from being put up for adoption
Right, my
and being
ultimate
rejected by your birth mother.
Right, that's where it all started for me. And of course, there was a tremendous amount of healing over that baby wound, as Karen and I call these things, my adoption abandonment wound, that happened with my near-death experience. And of course, there was also the event of meeting my birth family. For most of my life, I thought I had a birth mother out there, didn't think I had a birth father who was at all interested or engaged. And then in the year 2000, as I report in the book Proof of Heaven, I found out my birth parents had actually gotten married. Not only that, they had three children. So, at age, in my 50s, I find out that I've got a full biological family out there. That was a real shocker. And yet I obviously didn't belong with them. So that was an ongoing sense of rejection from the birth family. And to me, that was very challenging. So as Karen points out, yeah, I had a kind of a deep wound, and my NDE took me light years towards resolving that wound.
But it didn't
But it
necessarily
didn't
fix
fix it all.
everything.
No, it didn't. I mean, people
He's
should never,
human.
yeah, the NDE doesn't just fix it all and you come back, now I get everything. But what it does is serves as a catalyst to kind of give you a much bigger view of who you are and your relationship to the universe. And we're all much bigger and more important to the universe than our little materialist teachings would allow. And this is where kind of a connection with the mind of the universe is what we really tend to see as the result of near-death experiences. That's what proves to us that consciousness is primordial. The physical world emerges from consciousness. And that's especially obvious when you review the full power of life reviews. Life reviews happen in about half of near-death experiences. Um, about 80% of people say they're more real than lived experiences. A third of people say that their entire life is involved in a life review. And you might wonder, how can that happen during a 10-minute cardiac arrest? Well, it's because in that realm, you're completely timeless. You're not locked into Earth time at all. And therefore, a complete life review can occur. It's nothing magical. It's just part of that bigger spiritual realm. But most importantly, in this discussion of life reviews is something well over three-quarters of people who have life reviews see it from the perspective of everyone involved. And that's the most important piece because that shows us we're sharing that dream of the one mind. To hurt another is to hurt ourselves. And the best interpretation of that is the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated, is written into the very fabric of the universe through these life reviews that allow you to witness the events of your life through the perspective of everyone involved.
Thus your angst for the downtrodden.
Right. That's
Yeah.
where I really, I feel the heart. I think every soul is trying to do their best with what they have in the moment. And so I grant them a lot of space, as long as they're focusing more towards love, compassion, kindness in their own lives and how they deal with others. But I have personal difficulty looking at the world today where people are mistreated in that kind of system.
Yeah, and I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but my subconscious is telling me to bring it up. And like one example is, so this is episode 1860 maybe, and it's been going for almost 6 years. And it's now granted I'm single, I don't have kids, and it took a long time to get to the point where it paid all the bills and I didn't have to dip into savings. And when I say it pays all the bills, it's clearance. It's barely doing it, but it's doing it, which is awesome. And part of me still like j when I think about like how will it succeed, how will it grow forever, really up until like a couple days ago, my mind was always like, oh, I'll either like win a scratch off lottery ticket and make enough money that I can do the show for the rest of my life, or somebody will watch the show and be like, "That's awesome. Here's a ton of money." And I realized what I just thought it was like, yeah, those are just stupid kind of ego money thoughts. And I realized what it really was is no part of me thought that it was capable or worthy of earning things on its own.
Yeah.
Despite I've had on multiple guests who've gone on Joe Rogan who have told me off air, Tommy, I enjoyed going on you more. And they're not anything against him, but they're like, it was more connective. It was more electric. I just sent an email to a guy I had on last year. He headed up the F-35 fighter jet. He was the top guy, the whole thing. And I had him on and we talked about it. And I just randomly reached out to him the other day and he was like, "Oh, I remember you well." He was like, "That was the best interview I think I've ever had in my life." And like, here's like the top dog at Lockheed Martin. I've had so many guests tell me that, like off air, like, "Hey man, you got something special," or you got and no part of me thinks it's worthy in its own. And I'm not really too focused on that as much as I'm wondering what that says about myself. That in order for something to reach another level of value, and I'm using of US dollars as a metric, but love, I guess part of me just it doesn't see me as something worthy of that. And I don't and it's hard to even be upset about that because I think deep down I agree that it's whether it's the podcast or me that I'm not worthy of it. And that's why I don't fight back against it. And I have loving parents, nuclear family, three brothers, grew up private Catholic school, grew up in a gated community, like have a wonderful relationship. I had no trauma, like, but I don't know. That's kind of one thing that's been bubbling up more is I think on a deep level, like I don't think I am worthy, and by extension, the show, but less the podcast. And it's like, well, who does the podcast? Me. Okay, well, transitive property, A equals B, B equals C, A equals C. I'm not worthy. And I don't know if there's a question there or just a random
Well,
statement.
I would just observe here that I think one thing that gets our whole society and culture in trouble is when there's focus only on the bottom line and the profit motive. And if that's your measure of success, I think that often leads people in the wrong direction.
Sure.
What I see about you and your podcast authentic, heartfelt. You're here to do good for the world, and that's it. And so I would not at all start looking at, profit and dollar bottom lines as a measure of the great worth of what you're doing for the world. So, and people sense that. And that's what I think you're telling us with these some of your interviewees who really enjoy being on with you. I love being on with you because I sent somebody who was really right there to kind of help make the world a better place. And that's what, podcasts and the internet are basically a democratization of these good ideas and of things that can really liberate the world that's not totally focused on dollar value. And that's where I would say just rejoice in kind of what you're doing for the world and the good you're bringing, and keep that authentic, heartfelt value to your interviews and your podcast.
I would also point out, I've not listened to Joe Rogan. I don't have an opinion. I'm neutral on Joe Rogan. What I've heard others say about him, though, is that his earlier podcasts were much, much better before he got so famous, before he had to play all the commercials and answer to corporate sponsors, right? They
Mhm.
found him more interesting before he got so rewarded financially. And so I see you're nodding your head
Yeah,
because you get
well,
that money. I wouldn't say, I'll just use the phrase money can corrupt. Not to say that Joe Rogan is
sure.
corrupt at all, but it changed kind of the flavor of what he could deliver to his audience because he was no longer independent. And so independence is
Very
quite a
important.
wonderful, fabulous thing. Eben has that now. He's not tied to an academic institute. And people who are scientists who are tied to academic institutes, they kind of have to watch what they say sometimes. And he has no such
Call it as I see
restriction.
it. I don't have any boss who's going to call me up and fire me for saying the wrong
So
thing.
appreciate that about your current status
Right.
while you can, because one day it might not be that way.
I would say an agreement. Yeah, because I first started listening to him in 2011 when I remember studying organic chemistry. And I think that was within like 3 months of him starting the show. And I was like, this is awesome.
More
And
raw, more
and
real.
Yeah.
and then I
Yeah.
stopped after in like 2015 because I'm like, this is awful now. And I still
Mm.
kind
Yeah.
of feel the same way. So I don't know, maybe it's a blessing there to be as authentic for as long as I can.
Well, do
Yeah.
that. Just stick
Yeah.
with authenticity and heartfelt passion to make the world a better place, and you'll do fine.
And I'm thinking Howard Stern for some reason, he's quite the can be quite the
Uh,
controversial guy, but he
yeah.
hasn't really lost that, and he has seen a lot of fame. He hasn't lost it as much as some others, I think. So
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
possible.
You don't want to get bought out by corporate interests that then
Mm-mm.
start driving your message. That's a terrible thing to
We're
have.
hating watching the media, the bigger media go through that. It's
Yeah.
not fun to watch.
Now
So,
they're getting stretched in directions they should never go, as opposed to being authentic and true and factual in what they present.
Yeah, I've kind of joked before to the people
Yeah.
listening. I'm like, if it ever seems like the spark that is Tommy is gone and like the natural flow of things are gone, number one, unsubscribe because it means I've been bought off. But number two, you should smile because it means I finally made some money. So like that's how I look at it. I'm like the second my soul is gone, be like, it'll be
oh,
bittersweet.
what's
Unsubscribe,
funny,
do not watch
Tommy?
it.
What's funny is I feel like, and you have all the answers, and it's really good though for I know sometimes maybe I have all the answers, but it's really good to have that reflection from somebody else who can help kind of draw them out, make you see things because you nod your head so much as we're talking. You already know a lot of this stuff, but it's so hard to apply it to your own
Yeah.
situation. Very easy to see someone else and say, "Oh, do do," but when it's your own self. You have these weird beliefs. I'm not worthy, but you don't really realize you have that belief and you're confused. And so it's harder. It's definitely harder.
Well, I've kept you guys for far past an hour, but thank you. I legitimately really needed this today, so thank you so much. And as always, I genuinely love you both, and I'm extremely grateful to have you in my life. Thank you.
Well, Tommy, thank you for having us on. We love you
We
too,
do. We
and
love you too.
love coming on your show. So, we don't want to wear out our welcome. So
Nope,
we
no,
need some time, but we
yeah,
love coming back.
absolutely. And for everybody listening, please go in the description. I'll put the links to all the websites, all the beats, the books, Audible, good stuff. Go find that in the description. Please go listen to them. And Dr. Alexander and Karen, thank you guys so much.
Thank
All
you,
right. Thank you,
Tommy.
Tommy. We'll talk soon.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.